Welcome to the Committee for Oklahoma Prosperity podcast with Mike Mazie, CEO of Trinity Strategic Wealth, former state senator, and Oklahoma Secretary of Finance. Mike talks with public policy and industry leaders about needed transformative changes to make Oklahoma a top 10 state for people to live, work, and retire.
This is Mike Mazie, the CEO of Trinity Strategic Wealth and participant with the Committee for Oklahoma Prosperity. This quarter and this month, we're talking about law enforcement and public safety. At our quarterly breakfast forum, we had a great conversation and panel led by Tulsa County Sheriff Vic Regalado. The fan favorite I heard afterwards was definitely Sheriff Vic. So we wanted to have some time to get in a little bit deeper into some of the questions and details on, what's happening in the law enforcement world. We've been lucky to have Vic as our Tulsa County Sheriff. He's been committed to law enforcement for 20+ years. He was with Tulsa PD for 23 years, detective of homicide, supervisor of organized gang unit. His accomplishments on running the sheriff's department and improving operations have been extremely significant. For a super duper tough guy, though, a lot of people don't know he's a girl's dad. And he and his amazing wife, Jennifer, have 3 amazing daughters and 1 grandkid so far. So tell us, Vic, what's up with all those wonderful women in your life?
Oh, I am extremely lucky, first and foremost. I thought, my oldest is 27 now, and I thought 27 years ago when she was born first that it was God's little joke that he would give me a daughter. I knew absolutely nothing about that. I have a couple sisters, but, I was nobody expected me to be a girl's dad. And then lo and behold, he blesses us with 2 more daughters. And it has been a whirlwind, but it is they've made me a better person. I mean, they really have. They're such great daughters and great people, more importantly. And my wife, of course, is the everyday hero in that stuff. She's one of the most patient people I've ever been around, and thank God for that. But they're doing well.
Great. Well, over my 20 years in public service, I've been traditionally an expert in, finances and pensions and the budget and taxes. And, I always kind of referred to some of my colleagues in the public safety arena, but a lot has happened in the last several years, and you've helped me better understand, Sheriff, kind of the consequences of this, shift that we've seen in, law enforcement and some of what happened after state question, 790 passed, and, we seem to have shifted from my era of, be tough on crime to criminal, justice reform. So why don't you elaborate for us on, the shift that has taken place post state question 780?
Yes, since 780, which passed in 2017, and for those that might be listening who aren't familiar with it, 780 basically misdemeanorized felony drug crimes. With the idea that it would over time lessen the prison population here in Oklahoma, therefore causing savings in money, which would be filtered back to the counties for mental health treatment and substance abuse treatment, which when you say it like that, it certainly sounds wonderful. Saving money, helping people. The problem is it wasn't very well thought out, and that hasn't happened. In fact, the unintended consequences have been a rise not only in the homeless population, but within that population, those suffering from mental illness and substance abuse. And then on the flip side of that, there has been no money filtered to the counties for mental health treatment and or substance abuse treatment. And as a side note, our prison population is still where it's at. It has not significantly gone down, despite commutations and not
Early release.
And so, now we have a very serious problem on our hands. And then, when you add on marijuana, that is a gateway to a lot of bad things, despite what those who got it passed here would tell you. It is now, it is not the marijuana of the Cheech and Chong days or the Fast Times at Richmond High, where, marijuana typically was around 2.5% in THC, which is the stuff that makes you loopy. Now we're talking about anywhere from the low end, 35%, up to about 75% in purity. And what we're finding out is that it's actually causing psychosis in a lot of people who take it. And again, I'm not saying that if you go out and smoke a joint that you're going to go crazy, but you could. It has a tendency, what we're finding out, to unlock a gene or something that you have inside certain people, just like addiction. Some people get addicted very fast, and others it takes a lifetime. So that's what we're seeing. And then along with that, obviously, we saw illegal marijuana grows, and now Oklahoma is around number one in regards to the sales of illegal marijuana, which has brought a lot of unsavory characters from across the world, not just in America, to Oklahoma to buy lands up and start cultivating marijuana because of our very relaxed marijuana laws. So, it has been a perfect storm. It really has. And as for Tulsa, you don't have to be in law enforcement to see the consequences of that. You have seen, there's homeless people, many of them very young and working age, that are out across the city panhandling and committing quality of life crimes such as stealing and retail theft and trespassing and vandalism and on the high end, the criminal element. We've had in downtown Tulsa, we've had business owners beaten halfway to death. We've had children who've been exposed to individuals who have shown themselves to these children. I mean, it crosses the board in terms of what crimes they've committed. And, and again, we're not serving these people that are also suffering from mental illness and substance abuse. So it's almost been a perfect storm over this last decade of what's been going on. And there has been no criminal justice reform, at least that helps the law-abiding citizen. It's been all geared towards the criminal element, and it has been that way for a very long time. And we're just seeing the consequences of that.
Yeah, I'm particularly sensitive to small business owners. I've got 30 employees, a couple buildings. What was a pretty nice affluent area, isn't quite what it was. But you take, for example, many of our store or retail shop owners. My daughter's worked at a few here and there, and it seems like today's criminals have gotten much more brazen. They just walk in, they take stuff, whether it's at a convenience store or a pet store, And the employees, like my daughter, Sheriff, said, don't do anything. We don't want to create any escalation or endanger anybody, which I get from the store's standpoint. But
Absolutely.
um, it's become almost this accepted level of behavior, this cost of doing business. It just kind of seems outrageous to me. What is it that we need to do to reverse that? Because it's got to be hard on some of these business owners, and can they even afford to stay in business?
Well, that's the things. What most people don't realize is that your Targets, your Walmarts, your bigger retail stores, they can afford to lose up to 3 to 4 million in retail theft yearly, and not
Okay.
wonder. But what about the stores, your mom and pop stores, your local businesses? They're going under, or they're having to raise their prices to make up for the loss, to the point where, people aren't shopping there. It's too expensive. And so the taxpayer at the end of the day gets hit with it. And most people will kind of, you will hear people talk about retail theft not being violent. And for the most part, I would say, yeah, it's probably not, until you have an incident where a security guard or a loss protection kid who's working a job while going to college tries to stop somebody, ends up getting shot or stabbed or assaulted. Then it's a crime. Then it is a violent crime. But let's just take the violent part out of it. Right here, just a couple of years ago, we were involved in a multi-agency investigation of a group of people that started right here in Sand Springs, Oklahoma, who were able to start a very large theft ring that was funneling millions of dollars in stolen goods and shipping it to New Jersey to a crime family there, who was selling it on the internet for $10 under the market price. And they were making millions of dollars. And what they were doing is sending groups out across Oklahoma to your Targets, your Walmarts, your mom and pop stores, your Dollar Generals, and they were stealing under just under the felony threshold of $500, because or $1,000. I'm sorry, because we raised that up from $5 to $1,000. And so they would steal about $90 worth. But when you talk about 15 to 20 people doing it a piece and walking out, that's substantial property that has been stolen. And so, again, unless you're a large train, that can be super expensive to continue in operation. And so, it's bills like that, lowering the retail theft threshold, which, by the way, was lower than San Francisco's, which we all know what is happening out there with flash mobs, things like that. But we are actually lower than they are. And I know they're trying to remedy that with new legislation, but why we did that in the first place is beyond me. I've always said that being in the heartland, we had, for a host of reasons, is wonderful to live in. But the one advantage we have from a law enforcement standpoint is that we get to see things fail or succeed on the East and West Coast before those problems reach us. And so if we see legislation that fails in California, why on earth would we implement the same legislation here thinking it'll change? I mean, that's the very definition of mental illness, doing the same thing and expecting something different each time, right? Yeah. And so yet we do that. And I've never understood why, so we really, if we're going to change the way that things are going here and prevent some of the things that are headed our way, we've got to change our way of thinking and go against what might be popular and go for what is right by our law-abiding citizens.
That phrase you used, what might be popular, I think that pushed even, some of our Republican friends into, we got to get more people out of prison and we got to rehabilitate more people. And we, have to, focus on their capabilities to be, productive citizens, and we can do a better job with recidivism than they have in other states. And, maybe we can, but I'm not sure it's the taxpayer's responsibility to, turn really bad decision makers into, recovered citizens.
Yeah.
That argument aside, I think from my perspective, several of our Republican friends, since they've gotten, somewhat comfortable with being the incumbents, they tend to want to say, Sheriff, oh, we don't have the problems that New York has, or oh, we don't have the problems that Chicago has. But when you look at some data that I've seen on a per capita basis, which is a couple years stale, I get, but you see what's happening with the small business owners, and you see what's happening with, the data. How is it that we can communicate to the legislators? We're a little behind the curve here, and we've got to address some statutory items and reinforce our law enforcement community a little bit more. It's one thing, and we all believe it. I don't mean that people who say love the blue and support the blue don't mean it. I think they do, but I think some of us in the political world, they got their heads buried when they really need to listen to Sheriff Regalado. How do you think we get through to him? What is it that we need to provide to them so that they understand that we've got to address some problems?
Yeah, I think it takes a change of mind, a change of our thought process. And we need to start looking into how do we prevent these things from coming here, or not prevent them from coming, but be prepared so when they do come, we're ready for it instead of scrambling at the last minute and again, using something or a formula that hasn't worked already and trying to implement it here in a knee-jerk reaction to a complex problem. We can't do that anymore. We have to start thinking 2 to 3 steps ahead. And again, that's the fortunate part about living in Oklahoma is you get to see what's coming and prepare for it. And, and I think that, we've got to allow the experts to do it. I've spent 30 years in law enforcement. I am confident when it comes to combating crime. As are several of the leaders, law enforcement leaders across the state of Oklahoma. We need to sit down with our legislators and go, here's what's coming. Here's what we think, we need to do in order to be prepared for it. Or here's the issues and we may not be able to prepare for it. Let's brace ourselves. We have to work together and stop with this knee-jerk legislation to complex matters because it doesn't work. 2, it oftentimes makes the unintended consequences make things worse. And unfortunately right now we're again in that perfect storm where we're having to deal with all of these things with a law enforcement community that has been depleted. We are 100 deputies down. Tulsa Police Department is a couple hundred down. And that's just the broken record. Every law enforcement agency in the state of Oklahoma will tell you we cannot find people to work anymore. Marijuana's had a big part in that. You still have to pass a drug test in order to carry a firearm. And we're finding out that many can't because they smoke marijuana, and in their minds it is legal, which in effect it is. And so, it's made things difficult. And there's a lot of other variables that we could spend all day talking about why people are not coming back and working, not just in law enforcement, but you hear about it in the health industry. We need nurses, we need doctors. From a mental health standpoint, we're training, mental health counselors and doctors, and they're leaving for better pay in other states. So we got a lot of issues that I think if we start now, in a generation, we'll start to see some success. But in my very humble opinion and professional one, the things we're doing now, we're looking for a quick fix, and there is no such thing to the problems we have right now. We just, as citizens, as legislators, as law enforcement, we have to wrap our minds around this is not going to be a quick answer to a short-term problem. This is going to be a very lengthy process in which to combat some of these complex issues, so that in hopes in a decade or so we can start seeing the reverse. But we got to start now.
Speaking of quick fixes or knee-jerk reactions, everybody wants to be able to do something about illegal immigration because the federal government has totally abdicated its responsibility and is, not protecting our southern border. And it's just, shocking that millions upon millions of illegals can come into the country, and drug cartels and terrorists, it doesn't matter. They get through and they get released. And so Texas passes a law and Oklahoma legislators go, oh, I like that idea. Let's do that. And from what you've told me, they don't really talk to you or, the others. It's just, well, we got to do something. So let's do what Texas did, which led to House Bill 4156, which sounds nice. I imagine if I had been at the Senate and, I had read that and, somebody from Public Safety Committee said, here's what we've come up with, I probably would have voted for it, in all honesty, because I want to do something about illegal immigration. But, this whole idea of impermissible occupation that it came up with, and we're going to fine people, and then on the second or third offense we're going to send you out of the state. They're trying to shift on you or county sheriffs the responsibility of the federal government. And what are your observations with that, and how do they need to probably revisit that next year?
Well, it's another unfunded mandate. You have to ask yourself, who's going to pay for these programs? Who's going to pay for the deportation of the illegal immigrants that are arrested? What's going to happen when our county jails start to overflow with illegal immigrants that have been arrested? Who's going to ensure that in 72 hours they vacated the state of Oklahoma? Then you've got the housing of the biological identifiers of these individuals by OSBI. I love OSBI. I'm their director on their board, but it takes a long time just to get a lab in on a crime right here in Oklahoma. And we're going to ask them to be the gatekeepers of the bio-identifiers of all the illegal aliens that we arrest. And so that's a lot, right? And then let's take into account what is the reasonable suspicion in which allows us to arrest people. Are we going to start, on traffic stops, looking into your car going, well, you don't look like you're from here, so let me stop you. And then let me ask you if you speak English. And then let me ask if you're legal here. Well, determining citizenship is actually a very complex issue. You can't just do it on the side of a road or at a house where you've been called to. It takes time, because there's all kinds of reasons why somebody can actually not be a citizen but be here in the United States legally. A lot of visas, and even in the law enforcement community, if you're a witness to a crime or even a victim, you have the ability, provided that you follow through court services and testimony and all that, to get a visa to stay here legally. So there's a lot of variables in there. Yeah. And typically it's only the county sheriffs that run a program that does that, and that's called the 287G program. And I think there's only 3 agencies that do that, with Tulsa County being one of them. So again, great idea. And I think I can agree with the concept, because I do believe we will see a tremendous influx over the next few years of illegal immigrants. And some of them are going to undoubtedly be here to commit crime that affects our communities. And that's what I tell people, is that this is not a racist indictment. This is not, we don't like, immigration. No, these are individuals that we actually can stop the crime before it starts, right? So if we have an individual who's a killer and has entered into our community illegally, into our country illegally, and then into our communities, if we had stopped them at the border, right, and had a secure border in place, that's an individual that would have never have killed that person in this community, right? So this is one of the few things that we can actually stop ahead of time with proper border security, and immigration is such a complex deal because the reality is that a lot of them, and I would even say the majority, are coming here they're escaping terrible circumstances. They're wanting to make a better life for themselves and their family, and that's going to take a healthy immigration system. We have one in place. I think there's room for improvement on it myself, but and then since this bill came out, I'll tell you that I got a lot of calls of concern from local business owners who employ people who've come here illegally or on visas. And the thing is that they're not doing it for cheap labor. They pay these people what they would pay anybody. Their issue is that they can't find anybody in our community or Americans that are willing to do these jobs anymore. And the ones that come, they show up late for work. They can't pass drug tests. They work for a few hours, then quit. And, we've kind of lost our grit, I think, a little bit in our communities in regards to doing manual labor and jobs in the restaurant industry and things like that. Somewhere along the way, we started thinking we were too good for that. And it's backfiring. We're having businesses that are obviously closing down and struggling, or they're hiring immigrants, right? Mm-hmm. So they were concerned. They're like, look, I can't run a business if I don't have employees. And I said, I understand. I get that, and so we've got to figure out that answer. If we're going to say as a state, we're going to take over where the government has failed in regards to securing our communities from illegal immigrants, then I think we also need to look at how do we come up with something that allows somebody who's actually working, paying taxes, trying to assimilate. How do we make that effort a little bit better so that they can come over and bring something positive to our community? So it's such a complex deal. And again, that's the whole reason why this was, in my opinion, a knee-jerk reaction to a complex problem where we could have sat down, and we have time to do it because we're not exploding with illegal immigrants in here in Tulsa right now, right? But the anticipation is that absolutely, I absolutely 100% agree. We will see that over the next few years. Let's prepare for it properly now. And so if and when it does happen, now we're prepared with something that has been well thought out, that's not going to get stopped by the courts like 4156 just was. We're not looking at lawsuits, and our law enforcement is able to do their jobs and still engage in our immigrant communities so that they call us for service and we don't see an explosion of crime in our immigrant communities.
Yep. One more question. So you talked about the difficulty of staffing out the sheriff's department and, getting good applicants that want to go into public safety. And every business owner that I know is dealing with those issues. And, you mentioned a little bit about that already, getting high quality applicants and high quality candidates to work. Labor, vocational jobs, knowledge economy jobs, in industries like mine. So there's no, silver bullet, but, over a 3 to 7 year period, what would you like to see, the educational community, the legislature, the public safety community, collaborate on together to, encourage, some of our best and brightest to go into law enforcement and, remind everyone of what you told me. It's great to be in law enforcement because you get to, live a life of service and helping your fellow man and locking up the bad guys. What do you think are some of the elements that need to take place over the next several years?
I think that we need to approach it with in a multifaceted fashion. And I'll give you a prime example of what we did, kind of thinking outside of the box ideas, right? So we were having difficulty hiring detention officers for the longest time. And so we knew we had to do something different. We had to think outside the box. And what we did is we partnered with Tulsa Tech, which is a vocational school. They created a detention officer program for kids who were interested in working and not going to school for whatever reason, or wanted to work and go to school, and were also interested in law enforcement. And this was such a great stepping stone for somebody who wants to get into the criminal justice system. And so they started this course, and we started probably about 6 years ago. And now it's evolved into an academy there where kids who are getting ready to graduate their senior year can attend this while going to high school. And when they leave, when they finish and graduate, they have a job. They're guaranteed a job at the Tulsa County Sheriff's Office, and they've already been trained, and we take them in, and it's been wildly successful. And so that's just one idea, right? And it's helped us with our hiring now. You know, we still always need people. I think we always will in the jail world. It's such a difficult job, but we're not in a crisis mode there anymore. And it's because of programs like that. And so I think that if schools will get behind in encouraging kids, you know, I think the shameful fact is that over the last few years, you know, with the George Floyd issues and the woke community, you know, really going woke on us. There were schools that were actually making us look like the enemy, you know, and that's just it's a plain sad fact. But it is. It's a fact. And so when you tell young minds that over a period of time, they go, well, why would I want to do that job? You know, everybody hates you. And we've had those comments, you know, over the years. God, nobody likes law enforcement. I just don't know if I could do it. Well, you know, we're not perfect, but I will tell you that's a bold-faced lie. I mean, some of the greatest people have gone through these jobs and continue to work in this area. And you said it earlier, you know, there's really no greater honor than serving your fellow citizen, you know, and humanity. And now with the money that has been thrown at law enforcement, you can make a pretty good life for yourself, you know. I mean, you know, with us, you as just a regular deputy, you can top out at $90,000. With TPD, it's 106. I mean, that's not bad, you know, considering I was around 29,000 a year back in the day, right? But it's really not about the money. It really isn't. It's about service. It really is. As a young person, you know, we all were young and sought out exciting and new jobs. Well, you know what? In law enforcement, you have front row seats to the greatest show on earth, humanity. And, you know, and as time goes by, there's so many things you can do. You don't have to be in a patrol car the rest of your life. So there's a lot to offer, but we've got to get that message out to our young people who in turn really have to start coming back, you know. We've got to support our military. Our nurses, our teachers are all suffering right now, you know. If you haven't seen the state of our healthcare system, go to an emergency room at midnight on Saturday. You'll see what's going on firsthand, you know, and it's, you know, they're being overworked, and that can only last so long until it breaks. You know, so there's a lot of things that I think we need to start thinking outside the box. We need to do it by encouraging people. We need to collaborate for one another. You know, even though we're somewhat in competition for employees, I always encourage people who go, look, you know, the county may not be for you, but you know what? Tulsa Police Department's hiring, and it's a great place to work because we can't afford to be competitive right now. I think if the Tulsa Police Department starts to flourish, we'll flourish as a result of that. And in turn, other departments will flourish as a result of it.
The pie is big enough for everybody, hopefully, if we're getting out the right message.
That's my point exactly. And we will get the people, and but we just got to get them there, because right now I tell you we're not, and that's a problem. That's a real serious problem. Yeah, so I think changing our mindset, changing the way we view things, and sometimes just going against the grain. Just because everybody's doing it doesn't mean it's right. I think we need to start focusing on our own home, state of Oklahoma, and worry about the rest later. And I think that when we fix our own people and we provide the services that are sorely needed by our own citizens, then we can start looking to the outside and saying, well, hey, you know what, our house is pretty clean here. Why don't you come stay with us for a little bit, and we'll fix you right up. But I don't think we're at that point. I think I always joke and say it's like keeping a filthy house and then going to somebody else's house and telling them, boy, you live like a pig, right? We can't throw stones right now. We got a lot of problems that can be fixed, and I think we need to buckle down and start doing it.
Well, we're lucky to have you. I'm so glad we get you for another 4 years.
Thank you.
Great. You're a great Oklahoman, Sheriff, a great American. Thank you for all you and your team does to keep us safe. And hopefully with events like the Breakfast Forum and this, we can, create more and more opportunities for you to communicate with legislators and policymakers, because they really need to listen to you and collaborate with you and your counterparts, across the state before they get in a hurry with some legislation. So thanks so much for spending some time with us today, everybody.
Thank you, Mike.
We'll see you next time for the Committee for Oklahoma Prosperity.
The Committee for Oklahoma Prosperity is advancing ideas and policy that create growth and prosperity for the people of Oklahoma.